of 8. It's 2 large volumes. He is the foremost money expert in America as a result of that. But in doing that work, this is the way he thinks, on the Federal Reserve, he saw what is now happening. He foresaw this. He said to himself, you know, given this debt system, it's going to collapse. And with the collapse, there's going to be a lot of chaos. And with chaos, the government is going to seize upon that as its justification for enhancing its control over people. And so he got to thinking about that, and that led him to think about the Second Amendment, and he realized and he's just this brilliant, he realized that it's unconstitutional not to have a well-regulated state militias. So he decided to go to work on that and to make the case that it's absolutely necessary to revitalize and reinvigorate the well-regulated state militias. And he decided to produce 3 how-to books. First, make the case for this and what's going to happen if it's not there, and then follow that up with model statutes and the rest of it. His first book, he had 2 printings, and they sold out, and he's moved on to his second and third. My first stop on this tour was to spend a few hours with him. This is his first book. It's called Constitutional Homeland Security. What he's saying is, not this thing that we have now, this Department of Homeland Security, but a well-regulated state militia is the approach, the constitutional approach to Homeland Security. The image I have, we think of Switzerland. This is what we're really talking about here, in effect. In Switzerland, yeah, if anyone, there's a little bio of him on the back. If anyone wants to understand how this works and why it's really constitutional Homeland Security, one only has to look at what happens in Switzerland. Every boy and girl, when they reach that age, they are trained. They go off and they're trained in the use of firearms. And then they keep their firearm at home. They keep their weapons at home. And so the Hitlers of the world do not invade Switzerland because they know they've got a heck of a problem on their hands with everybody trained and armed. So they just don't do it. And so that's what is meant, in effect, that's an image. That's a well-regulated state militia. And if it wasn't for the well-regulated state militias that were in place in our colonies, Washington wouldn't have had much to work with, took on the job. And so Ed Vieira is preparing these 3 how-to books, and he is now at work. He's thoroughly researched. He's finished his research on getting all the statutes that were in place in the colonies when they had these, requiring these well-regulated state militias. And he's found out that most of them read about the same, but nonetheless he's now at work preparing these model statutes which he believes ought to be submitted to every state legislature. Whether they act on it or not, that's something else, but they ought to be submitted to every state legislature to reinvigorate and as a defense against any kind of problem we might have from offshore or domestically with our own government. It's out of print, and I told him that we will order 150, one for each of the 150 delegates that will be going off to Philadelphia. Now the 5th or 6th of this meetings like this on the tour that I'm currently on, and the issue always comes up, well, how do we get one of these? They're not in print anymore, but we are going to order 150 of them for the delegates, and we would be happy to order additional ones. And so what we're having people do, pad going around where people are writing down their name and email address. If you would like a copy of this, it's $19.95, post-paid, you pay after you get it. Just put a yes next to your name, and we'll see, we'll add those numbers to the number that we're having printed. Okay, so there is a petition for redress of grievances that's been repeatedly served on every member of Congress and ignored. And then, of course, there's one on foreign policy. By the way, you've heard Ron Paul, during his campaign, mention the unconstitutional to have these gun control laws. It's unconstitutional. The Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. The income tax is unconstitutional. The Iraq invasion is unconstitutional, and so on. And he also mentions our foreign policy is all unconstitutional. Here's our take, and this is why we went to work. We looked for the constitutional hook. What is it that is being violated, if anything, in the Constitution by our foreign policy? I don't like to talk about these issues as political questions for the give and take of society. Is there a constitutional provision, a restriction, a prohibition that is being violated? Is government not doing something that they're mandated to do? And so we found such a hook, and we rely on that. Here's the logic. Throughout history, people and their government are always like this. They're always at loggerheads. The government is always trying to seek more control, and the people are always, want to be left alone and so forth, some percentage of the people. So they're always like this. And over in the Middle East, and in everywhere else, people, it's like Ronald Reagan said, government is the enemy of freedom. The more government you have, the less freedom you have. So as Ronald Reagan put it best, government is the enemy of freedom, right? So people are at loggerheads with their government, always, everywhere, throughout history. And in the Middle East, this is my take on it. Those people, those governments are very oppressive. Every single one of them in the Middle East is oppressive. They are oppressing the people, whether it's the royal family or it's in Jordan or Syria, wherever, Israel, there's oppression going on, okay? And so those people, after a while, we're over there and we're propping up those governments with our foreign aid and in other ways. We engineered a coup in Iran that got the Shah in there and took the democratic government out. We are interfering in the internal affairs of foreign countries around the world. We're doing this routinely. And so after a while, those people see this, they understand it, and they say, the friend of my enemy is my enemy. And so we become their enemy. They're trying to gain their freedoms, enhance their freedoms, and they're being held down, and they're seeing that the government is as strong as it is, in part because of the United States, all right? So they begin to direct their hostilities towards us. These are facts. They begin to direct their hostilities towards us. What does that get us? We get a war on terror. And what does a war on terror give us but a police state? That is the logic. That's what is going on. You can't deny it. It's factual. And so, is there a constitutional hook here? Yes. If you look in the first article, all of the enumerated powers of government, those enumerated powers are preceded with a short paragraph that says, in effect, that these powers of the government shall be used for two purposes. For the general welfare of the people and to defend the country. All right? So is it in our general welfare? Is it in the national interest to have a police state? No, it's not. And is it in our general interest, to have a war on terror that gives us this police state? No. And so you trace it back